Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, and Ilhan Omar are officially booted from their committee assignments. Now, while Schiff and Swalwell have been renominated by the Democrat Party, Kevin McCarthy has officially said no. So we'll go over that. We'll talk about what's happening there and where we go next, including, by the way, a Washington Post opinion piece saying that McCarthy, you are going to regret this. But we'll go over some of that and what that means and where we go with that. In other news, Mitch McConnell comes around onto Kevin McCarthy's side, saying that Kevin should be the one and the only one who is taking the lead in negotiating on the debt ceiling, which sounds a little bit to me like they're throwing him under the bus. So we'll talk about that. And also, by the way, a New York Magazine article that says that Republicans won't name their debt ceiling demands. I don't know about you, but I know what the demand is, but we'll talk about that and where that goes. The National Archives missed the deadline set by the House, arbitrarily, of course, as to when the Biden documents were supposed to be returned or released. So we'll be talking just a bit about that and what that means. And Google is facing down an antitrust lawsuit for being anti-competitive in the marketplace. It is going to be all this and more. I got more votes than Kevin McCarthy. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Happy Hump Day, everybody. My name is Jay Edgar. Welcome to your evening news. That is right, this is Contemporary. I hope everybody had a good first half of their week here. We're over the hump for most of us who are working on a regular schedule here, so it's time for us to go back in and look down towards the weekend right now. That is, unless you work on Saturday, which I don't this weekend. So we'll be going over some of that. I'll be going and seeing my parents this weekend, I think, again. I'm going to do wash, and It's not that I'm against doing the pay wash, by the way. I know some people have accused me of that over in private chats that I've had over that. It's not that I'm against that right off the bat. It is the fact that in the building that I live in this little tiny closet in, while I start house hunting, which, by the way, I'm ready to start doing that, the dryer doesn't work. I went out to dry clothes the first time I was here. I paid for the laundry service here, and I came back with a load of wet, dark clothes. So, yep, that's... and, you know, I do spend some time with my parents, too. So, I mean, not all is lost. But, yeah, I'll be doing that this weekend here. I hope you guys are doing so well for this weekend. A little bit of an update for those of you who are not new here. I do not stay with the live chat as often as I should, but I will be looking over. I'm trying to, as we come in here, and I'm not running out the door to go to work every day, I am trying to catch up with more of the live chat and give you guys more of an opportunity to voice yourselves. We're still going to be mostly focused on news for this program, so I do hope that you guys will come out here and share your opinions just a bit more, but we do have a lot to go over here today. Not as big and full of a show as we had yesterday, but we definitely do have some stuff to talk about, especially with Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell being removed from their committee assignments and the massive amount of cope that comes with this. And I will be talking just a bit about that and what's actually happening with this, because, I mean, they want you to believe one thing and yet another thing is true, but we'll go over some of that. We'll talk the debt ceiling, we'll talk about the Google antitrust, and something I didn't put in the teaser is Meta is just about ready to put Trump back on their platform, so we'll be talking about that as well over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and more. Go check out all that great programming as we look to build you a better news and culture experience from the common man for the common man. That is right, too much of our news and our culture has been influenced by people who wear suits that cost more than our houses. And that's not right. These people have never had to make the same decisions that you have had to. Do you think Tucker Carlson has ever had to wonder whether he's had to pay rent or pay the heating bill or eat or pay rent or, even be faced with a hard time? No, these people don't know what it's like to be you and I. And I know many of you probably haven't either, but these people don't know what it's like to be the common man. So that's right. Get your news and culture from the common man. That's right. Go and check that out. And go check out great friends of mine as well. They're always happy to see you, and a few of them do a little bit more live chat than I do. And with that, we're going to go down and get into the news. I'm unaware of what Velma is, so I can't help you with that, Grant. So, sorry. No idea. Let's start out today, as we always do, with finance. Looking at the Dow for the afternoon. I spent 3 years doing this in the morning, so it is a habit for me to come back out and say, let's look in at your Dow for the morning, but it is afternoon here. The Dow is down. I'm sorry, it is slightly up. Just barely, though. It looks like it's down when we look at the chart, but it did clear just barely up. The Dow ending the day at 743.84, spent its almost entire day down, with the exception of a couple peaks above the previous close line, including the close. It gained 9.88 points, or 0.29%. So just barely eking out a win, but enough for IBD to come back out and brag about the fact that it won for 4 days in a row. So we'll be talking about that and what's driving the markets in both directions here as we go. Looking in at your Bitcoin, which is at 126.90. That is up on the day. 490.8 points, or 2.17%. Resting above that 23,000 mark. So, and it did get start looking towards 24,000, but was tumbled off towards the end before striking back one more climb. So that's where we're sitting at for that, and where we go with that. The gas prices. Now, there are a lot of people out there that are talking about a major spike in gas prices. The Madison area has not seen it yet, and neither has the La Crosse area where I live. But I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that it stays that way. Although, with the Biden admin at the helm and the fact that now they're not tapping the strategic reserves and now trying to refill them, I've unfortunately got the fear that it's going to go higher and we're going to be seeing another tough summer. So we'll see what happens with that. But as for right now, looking at the Isthmus, the gas prices from yesterday are largely unchanged. 320 out to the southwest side, 309 to the west side. The Speedway on the southwest side also at 320. On the Isthmus is at 316. Entering the Isthmus at the Quick Trip is at 314. Both the Quick Trips on the north side have remained the same from yesterday. And again, the BP on the belt line has disappeared. So largely unchanged. There really hasn't been any motion in that. These prices may not reflect your local prices. Do check your local gas buddy or your local Google Maps for gas to see what yours are, but we will continue to watch the benchmark and see where the patterns and the trends go. I didn't know there was one of those either. Grant, how about a review of a movie? Person who never watches movies. You guys know that I've only seen like 5 movies in my life. I've never seen a movie from that franchise, and I know that Puss in Boots is from the Shrek franchise. Although I've never seen him in a Shrek movie. I've never seen a Shrek movie past Shrek 2. Alright, from Investors Business Daily, Dow Futures, Tesla pops on bullish Elon Musk. Chevron sets $75 billion buyback. Market rally shows this bullish trade again. From Ed Carson, Dow Futures turned slightly higher after hours, along with the S&P and the Nasdaq, as Tesla rose late as Elon Musk was bullish following mixed quarter 4 earnings. ServiceNow and Lam Research also reported after the close. Dow Jones giant Chevron announced a mammoth buyback, with CVX stocks flashing a possible buy signal. United Rentals, Steel Dynamics, and IBM also reported, with Teradyne on tap tonight as well. The stock market rally stumbled Wednesday morning as Microsoft and Boeing were among the early earnings-related losers. The major indices tested or undercut key levels, but came well off lows, closing at or near intraday highs for a fourth straight session. A key reason: Boeing reversed slightly higher and Microsoft slashed losses. United Rentals is on the IBD leaderboard watch list. United Rentals, Lam Research, and Steel Dynamics are on the IBD Big Cap 20. So that's where we stand for that, looking at the futures. Dow futures were just above fair value with CVX stock. That's Chevron, I believe. Let me go check the symbol. Yep, Chevron. And IBM, both blue chips. S&P 500 futures climbed 0.15 and the NASDAQ rose 0.3. Tesla, LRCX is Lam Research. ServiceNow, and STLD is Steel Dynamics. I hate that they interchange the symbols and the names. I've mentioned that before because it is hard to keep track of which one it is, and a collection of letters doesn't always mean anything compared to what the stock is. But Tesla, Lam Research, ServiceNow, and Steel Dynamics are S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 stalwarts. Early Thursday, investors will get their first read on fourth quarter economic growth. The GDP report will also include the quarterly PCE price index, providing a strong signal for the December PCE inflation reading on Friday. Also, Thursday durable goods orders, new home sales, and jobless claims are on tap. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. So that's what we see off the markets. I want to look at the housing market briefly here. Looking in from Fox Business, Goldman Sachs says 4 cities will suffer a 2008 crash in home values. I hope this city is one of them, although I'm not anticipating that. From Landon Meehan over at Fox Business, Goldman Sachs expects home values to worsen through 2023 amid continued skyrocketing interest rates and declining housing prices. The firm wrote to clients earlier this month that it predicts 4 U.S. cities will suffer the most catastrophic dips, drawing comparisons to the 2008 housing crash. San Jose, San Diego, Austin, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona will likely see noticeable increases before drastic decreases of more than 25%. These declines will be similar to those witnessed during the Great Recession in 2008. Home prices across the U.S. fell around 27% at the time, according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Index. Our 2023 revised forecast primarily reflects our view that interest rates will remain at elevated levels for longer than currently priced in, with 10-year Treasury yields peaking in 2023, Goldman Sachs strategist wrote, according to the New York Post. As a result, we are raising our forecast for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate to 6.5% for year-end 2023, representing a 30 basis point increase from prior expectation. That's quite a bit. In 2022, mortgage rates jumped from 3% to 6%. This national decline should be small enough to avoid broad mortgage credit stress, with sharp increases in foreclosures nationwide seeming unlikely. Goldman Sachs wrote, that said, overheated housing markets in the Southwest and Pacific Coast, such as San Jose, Austin, Phoenix, and San Diego, will likely grapple with peak-to-trough declines of over 25%, presenting localized risk of higher delinquencies for mortgages originated in 2022 or late 2021. The bank says these cities will suffer the lowest prices this year because they became too detached from fundamentals during the Pinko-Pox pandemic housing boom. Goldman Sachs also forecasts that many northeastern, southeastern, and midwestern markets could see milder corrections. Home prices are expected to dip slightly in New York City, minus 0.3%, and Chicago, minus 1.8%, while Baltimore and Miami will see higher prices, the firm said. Assuming the economy remains on the path to a soft landing, avoiding a recession, and the 30-year fixed mortgage rate falls back to 6.15% by year-end 2024, home price growth will likely shift from depreciation to below-trend appreciation in 2024, Goldman Sachs wrote. The average 30-year fixed was 7.37% at its peak in November, which is ridiculous, by the way. but also somewhat necessary because this also affects people going out and, again, starting a business, filing for a new self-employment. I mean, right now I'm looking at building a new LLC for myself to go along with the other one that I already have. And just to get started with that, and then also taking out loans to buy equipment, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that except for taking some stuff out on cash to do it. And now you expect people to go back out and start a new business, create new jobs, etc. The jobs that are out there that people are trying to fill are the jobs that were sitting out there unfilled during the Trump presidency. Before the Pinko-Pox pandemic started, we have just barely refilled what was out there before. And we are starting to actually, quote, create new jobs, but a lot of that is, as mentioned before, people taking out second jobs because they can't take out groceries on credit anymore. There's that aspect to everything that's going on as well. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve telling us that a rise in unemployment, or at least a rise in first-time jobless claims, is the best thing for the economy. What do you think is going to happen to those people's homes if they have to go on unemployment for a even short-term amount of time? What's the asset that they have with the most value that they can get cash out of, if they can even get cash out of it? Short sell the house and hopefully get a smaller one or find a new apartment to live in. This is not going to turn out well, no matter how much Goldman Sachs tries to rosy up the picture. Unless the federal government stops spending, to which the Federal Reserve comes out and says, oh no, you guys can totally go back and participate in the market again. Which is a possibility, given the infighting coming out of Congress. Unless that happens, I'm sorry, but the Federal Reserve has a vested interest in watching the housing market fall and your personal finances fall with them. But we'll see what happens with that and where that goes. We have got to talk about Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell. So we're going to start today from the Hill. McCarthy formally blocked Schiff and Swalwell from the Intel panel. From Mike Lillis and Michael Schnell. Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Tuesday formally rejected two Democrats, Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, from serving in the House Intelligence Committee, escalating the 2-year tit-for-tat battle between parties over who's qualified for certain positions on Capitol Hill. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had written to McCarthy on Saturday, asking that both Schiff and Swalwell be seated on the Intel panel, where membership assignments come solely at the discretion of the Speaker. But McCarthy said Schiff's and Swalwell's previous actions make them unfit to serve on the panel with jurisdiction over and access to sensitive issues of national security. In order to maintain a standard worthy of the committee's responsibilities, I am hereby rejecting the appointments of Representative Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell to serve on the Intelligence Committee, he wrote in a letter to Jeffries on Tuesday. The move was no surprise. Republicans have been up in arms over the issue since 2021, when Democrats staged votes to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paula Gosar from their committees, following revelations that they had promoted violence against some of their Democratic colleagues, which again is not true in either case. The eviction votes came after McCarthy declined to punish either lawmaker internally within the GOP conference, which is typically where such disciplinary actions are meted out. Still, McCarthy on Tuesday denied that his decision regarding Schiff and Swalwell was retribution for Greene and Gosar. It kinda is, but I'll go over some of that. We'll talk about what's being said in the official narrative versus what's actually happening. And by the way, what's happening with Schiff and Swalwell both is and isn't retribution for Greene and Gosar. It's the same thing with Ilhan Omar. This is not anything. Is this supposed to be a double negative? This is not anything political. This is not similar to what the Democrats did, McCarthy told reporters on Tuesday. Kinda is. Just outside his office on the Capitol. Schiff, the former chairman of the Intelligence Committee, had led a series of investigations into the former president, serving as the lead impeachment manager of Trump's first impeachment, which both heightened his national profile and made him radioactive among Trump's supporters, of which McCarthy is not one, by the way. McCarthy has accused him of lying to the public about Trump's ties to Russia, a charge that Schiff has dismissed as political retribution. His objection seems that I was the lead impeachment manager on Donald Trump's first impeachment, and that we held him accountable for withholding hundreds of millions of dollars of military aid from Ukraine in order to try to extort the country and helping his political campaign, Schiff told reporters on Tuesday night. Yeah, I mean, completely different from withholding millions of dollars in military aid unless you fire a prosecutor. Schiff also noted that McCarthy's road to speakership was successful only after he secured support from former critics, including Green, charging the process had left him beholden to those conservatives. I think it's just another body blow to the institution of Congress that he's behaving this way. Why? That's exactly how you behave. But it shows you just how weak he is as a speaker, that he has to give to the most extreme elements of this conference. In this case, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Paul Gosars, Schiff said. The accusations surrounding Swalwell are of a different sort. The California Democrat was associated with a suspected Chinese spy who had fundraised for his 2014 campaign, a revelation that was not made public until 2020. And McCarthy has said that a confidential FBI briefing on the episode has left him convinced that Swalwell is a national security risk. When Eric Swalwell would be in the private sector and can't get security clearance there, we're not going to provide him with secrets to America, McCarthy told reporters. McCarthy's also vowed to block Rep. Ilhan Omar from sitting on the House Foreign Affairs Committee as a rebuke for previous comments she made that were critical of Israel and its supporters, some of which have sparked allegations of anti-Semitism. In 2019, the Congresswoman, who is a Somali refugee, apologized after suggesting wealthy Jews are buying congressional support for Israel. Wait. We have to apologize for that if we want to be in Congress? Well, damn. I guess I'm disqualified from Congress. My Discord presence disqualifies me from Congress right there. Holy crap. Omar's situation, however, is different from that of Schiff or Swalwell. While McCarthy has the unilateral authority to block appointments to the Intelligence Committee, the full House must ratify committee membership for the Foreign Affairs panel, meaning a majority of the chamber will have to vote to block the Congresswoman from serving, which is, by the way, what they did with Green and Gosar. That effort's already proving to be an uphill battle. Representative Victoria Spartz of Indiana announced Tuesday she will not support keeping Omar off the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Nancy Mace has expressed coolness to the idea. Republicans can afford to lose only 4 votes in the narrowly split House amid united Democratic opposition, which means the party can afford only 2 more defectors to still block Omar. That number could shrink to 1 if Greg Steube, who's recovering in Florida from a fall, misses the vote. The congressman on Monday said he will be sidelined in Sarasota for several weeks. It's unclear when a vote to block Omar from the panel will come to the floor. The House Democrats Steering and Policy Committee is slated to meet this week to finish the committee assignments, and Omar is expected to be returned to Foreign Affairs. The full chamber would be tasked with ratifying the rosters. Alright, let's talk about what's happening here. So, is this retribution for Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar? Oh, you bet your ass it is. You bet your ass it is. Now, under former decorum, and this is, by the way, what we warned Democrats about when they voted to remove Green from committee. The way that now we're talking about Ilhan Omar being removed from her committee. This was, like, all the Democrats, you were warned this was going to happen. Exactly. Verbatim, you were warned that this was going to happen. That once the opposing party gets to choose who is on a committee and who isn't, it's going to be used. I can't. And this is me coming back and seeing Kevin McCarthy for who he is. I can't see a universe where he would have made this move previous to Marjorie Taylor Greene being denied her committee assignments, especially with the two on the House Intelligence Committee. Now, something else that I want to point out with this is that McCarthy, even when it comes down to the question of Omar on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ilhan Omar is not being denied all of her committee assignments, just the one that is relevant to, well, she's not being denied anything right now, but the threat that's out there has nothing to do with all of her committee assignments. The Democrats can turn around and reassign her to a different committee. And I don't see a reason why she wouldn't get denied, or why she wouldn't be seated on a different committee. And there are plenty of other ones out there for her to be on. It's the same thing with Schiff and Swalwell. Now, of course, obviously, Kevin McCarthy can only unilaterally block them from the House Intelligence Committee. He doesn't have the authority to block them from any other committee without a full vote to the floor. And if they do get blocked from any other committee, then that will be a retributionary vote on the House floor to block them from that, to not seat them onto those committees. But as far as decorum goes, no, I don't see Kevin McCarthy doing this unless this had happened on the Democrat side first. I don't see that as a reality because I don't see Kevin McCarthy having that level of balls. Let's face it. He is basically another nut-free senator who just goes into whatever little niche over there gains him the most power. He doesn't care. It's whatever's going to give Kevin McCarthy the most power. Whether it be go and sideline with the MAGAs, whether it be go on with the Bomb the Brown Kids, War Pigs, or whether it be with I am sainted, call me Jesus, Jesus Republican. And right now, this is what gives him the most power and clout among Republicans, that he's taking a stand against the evil Democrat. So I would be curious to see, because it does look like, yes, this is going to go through with Schiff and Swalwell. What happens with them with any of their other committee assignments? Democrats, you made your bed with this. You pushed the issue on both situations. And again, didn't come out and suggest, oh no, Marge, Paul, let's just put them in somewhere else because they're not good fits with what they've done with their committee assignments. It is, no, they are off of all of their committees. Nothing, they're not allowed to serve. And we hope that their voters will punish them for not representing them in Congress. But we'll continue to watch this and see what happens. A bit of a Cope article from the Washington Post, Where Democracy Goes to Die in Darkness. This is an op-ed, so the opinions expressed in here are not necessarily the opinions of the Washington Post, Turn Some Pages Productions, LLC, Contemporary, or your host, J. Edgar. But reading from the Washington Post, opinion, McCarthy may regret kicking Schiff off House Intelligence Committee. From the editorial board with no author given. I haven't pre-read this, so I don't know what level of cope this is. It tells you much about the priorities of Kevin McCarthy that he has seated serial fabulist George Santos on multiple House committees while removing Adam Schiff from the intelligence panel he has led for the past 4 years. Well, Adam, here's the thing. I mean, if you want to be taken seriously at this point right now, maybe you should release that smoking gun evidence on the Russian collusion that you've been telling us you've had since 2015. There's a thought. The full House would have to vote if McCarthy forges ahead with plans to expel Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. But the Speaker has the power to unilaterally block members from the intelligence panel. Just because Mr. McCarthy has the power, however, doesn't mean he should have used it. This is payback for votes 2 years ago by the Democratic-led House to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar from their committees. The editorial board didn't endorse that effort at the time because we feared this sort of tit-for-tat cycle. Bull-shh. There might be kids watching. Bull crap. But there are significant differences, starting with the fact that some Republicans joined Democrats in voting to strip Ms. Greene and Mr. Gosar of their assignments. No Democrat has expressed support for this. Moreover, both of the Republicans had at least implicitly encouraged political violence. Mr. Gosar posted an animated video depicting the murder of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Oh my god. Do we have to go watch the video again? There was not a murder depicted. Ms. Greene claimed on social media that deadly school shootings were staged and favorited posts calling for the execution of Democrat leaders and federal agents. Yes, before she was elected. Which means that was between her and the people of Rome, Georgia. Last month, Ms. Greene boasted that she and former Trump aide Stephen Bannon would have succeeded if they organized the storming of the Capitol on January 6th. "We would have won," she said. "Not to mention, we would have been armed." She subsequently calls this sarcasm. Both Ms. Greene and Mr. Gosar received coveted slots on the House Oversight and Accountability Committee this year. Mr. McCarthy accuses Mr. Schiff of hyping evidence related to Russian interactions with Trump's 2016 campaign and not being forthright about his knowledge of the identity of the whistleblower who filed the complaint. Later substantiated that led to... No, it wasn't substantiated. That led to Mr. Trump's impeachment for shaking down Ukraine. The Speaker justified removing Rep. Eric Swalwell from the same committee by suggesting he was compromised by a Chinese intelligence operative, but fact-checkers say there was no evidence Mr. Swalwell did anything wrong. Yeah, but he would still be denied security clearance, because this was out to light if he was in a private sector military job. We suspect the real reason Republicans are going after Mr. Schiff is that he's been so effective. No, they wouldn't be going after him if he wasn't doing a good job. That is the biggest cope that I've ever seen in my life, and it's a cope that comes constantly over and over again. Then Speaker Pelosi had such confidence in Mr. Schiff that she made him, not the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the point person on the first of Mr. Trump's impeachments. He also performed valuable service as a member of the Select Committee that investigated the Selfie Fest. If Dianne Feinstein retires, as many expect in 2024, Mr. Schiff appears likely to run for Senate. Which is probably why they're so mad at, Katie, what the hell was her name? The other one in California that's running there, because, I mean, this is probably a anointed position for Schiff. It is possible that Mr. McCarthy's pettiness could redound to the political benefit of his fellow Californian. He might have laid the groundwork for Mr. Schiff to succeed Ms. Feinstein, not only as senator, but also in leading a role on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Well, if he's going to be anointed senator anyway, I mean, how does that do any... These people. He's only doing this because he was so effective. What a load of cope. Alright, from Fox News, which, by the way, I'm a little embarrassed by how many times I used Fox News in this particular episode. I don't like Fox News. But they were doing coverage that other people weren't today. White House says Schiff and Swalwell bring expertise to Intel Committee after getting boot from McCarthy. From Kelly Lako. White House Press Secretary Token Diversity Hire said Wednesday that Democrats Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell should remain on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence after getting the boot from Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Schiff and Swalwell, and also Omar, are our expertise and bring a lot to the experts probably, and bring a lot to the table when it comes to foreign policy and national security, diversity hire said. I will say that, when it comes to that committee, it should not be politicized. It should be independent, she continued. And again, those congressional members bring a lot of expertise to that committee, and I'll leave it there. That is an awful lot of words to say absolutely nothing. In a letter to McCarthy, Hakeem Jeffries asked that the two eminently qualified legislators be reappointed to the committee despite Swalwell's association with a Chinese spy and Schiff's promotion of the discredited Steele dossier. On Tuesday, McCarthy sent a letter to Jeffries in which he stated that he was rejecting the appointments of Swalwell and Schiff to the Intelligence Committee. I appreciate the loyalty you have to your Democrat colleagues, and I acknowledge that your efforts to have two members of Congress reinstated to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, wrote McCarthy, but I cannot put partisan loyalty ahead of national security, and I cannot simply recognize years of service as the sole criteria for membership on this essential committee. Integrity matters more. So, they're out. And we will see what happens with that, because I'm sure that this is a fight that is not over yet. Let's talk about the debt ceiling. We've got one here from our friends over at NPR. McConnell says McCarthy should take the lead in negotiating the debt ceiling standoff, which is, by the way, a toss under the bus, because, and this will be NPR praising Mitch McConnell for throwing Kevin McCarthy under the bus, even though they will turn around and make him the demon once again. And if you want such partisan bickering that mostly comes down to who a person is mean against versus what letter they have after their name, make sure you hit that donate button, because NPR needs our money, comrade. It's not your money, it's our money, to make sure that they can shift and spin the narrative however they want. So make sure you hit that donate button, and make sure people like Barbara Sprunt and Dustin Jones get paid to tell you and spin the truth, and make sure that you will never ever vote for a Republican again. Only Democrats, no matter what part of the Democrat Party they are, only Democrats from here on out. NPR is never printing reality. National Progressive Radio. Let's see what it is that they have to say. Senate Minority Leader Turtleman McConnell said crafting a solution to avoid a catastrophic debt default this summer should originate in the Republican-controlled House, with Speaker McCarthy taking point on negotiations with the White House. Translation. Translation. I want McCarthy to be the only one out there talking to Biden so that when this fails, the news doesn't say anything about me. I can't imagine any debt ceiling provision passed out of the Senate with 60 votes could actually pass this particular House, McConnell told reporters on Tuesday. I think the final solution to this particular episode lies between Speaker McCarthy and the President. Just wait, the next thing they're going to be saying is that Mitch McConnell is a Nazi because he said final solution. The U.S. hit the debt limit last week, catapulting Washington into a familiar high-stakes political fight with potentially devastating economic consequences. The Treasury has employed extraordinary measures to cover the debt for several months, a band-aid that will be torn off by June if Congress fails to raise or suspend the debt limit before then. The federal government won't be able to pay its obligations like Social Security and Medicare, which is, of course, because it's NPR, the first thing they're going to go after. Well, it's going to be your Social Security and your Medicare. What are you going to do? They can't take money from anything else. It's just going to be your Social Security and Medicare. It will also lead to an unprecedented debt default, the economic consequences of which would ripple worldwide. Speaking with reporters Tuesday night, McCarthy said he wants to find common ground with Joe Biden to establish a responsible debt ceiling. The speaker said he wants to eliminate wasteful government spending. However, Biden has maintained that raising the debt ceiling to avoid a default is not up for debate. And yet again, it's still going to go and fall completely on the shoulders of McCarthy. Mostly because of publications like National Progressive Radio. McCarthy has called the president's unwillingness to negotiate irresponsible. I want to look the president in the eye and tell me there's not a dollar of wasteful spending in government, McCarthy said. Who believes that? The American public doesn't believe that. Our whole government is designed to have compromise. Historically, a debt limit breach has been avoided by simply raising the debt limit, something that's been done 78 times since 1960. That's 78 times too many. As NPR's Ron Elving reports, the accumulation of debt and subsequent raising of the debt limit has been done by both Republicans and Democrat administrations. That doesn't make it right. The ceiling was last raised by $2.5 trillion on December 2021. But this time around, some House Republicans who narrowly control the Senate chamber want to tie the debt ceiling talks to negotiations on spending cuts. McConnell told reporters he thinks that it's entirely reasonable for the House to put spending reductions on the table. Democrats have cried foul, claiming House Republicans are flirting with a debt default to try to extract budget cuts. Yes. Because the hope is that the Democrats don't have the balls to let it happen. Top Democratic leaders also note that there were bipartisan votes to lift the debt ceiling when former President Trump was in office. Okay, again, that word, they keep using that word. The word bipartisan doesn't mean correct. It doesn't mean right. It just means that a large amount of people were too afraid to go back and try to do the right thing at the right time. I don't understand where this comes from, where they think that bipartisan automatically means that this is the right thing to do. It's not. This is a manufactured and unnecessary crisis that's going to damage our economy and jobs well before the default. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon told reporters Monday, I think it really holds Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid hostage because they will always go directly. Here's the thing with Democrats in Washington, D.C. There is, in the hundreds of billions of dollars being allocated to the IRS, to put 87,000 more IRS agents on the floor. There are national bank bailouts that shouldn't be happening because the government is getting involved and picking winners and losers. There's an infrastructure package that, while we may need, could be done at a local level and we really can't afford. Bridges to nowhere to try to make jobs, to try to keep people spending money again. There are billions, if not trillions of dollars that we can go back and cut out of the federal budget. Foreign aid. Look at all that money we're sending over to Ukraine. Another $45 billion to them in the last omnibus spending package. All the money that's going out to NATO when they won't come back and pay out their fair share. Or grants to colleges to study canine lesbianism or things like that. There are, again, billions, if not trillions of dollars that we can go to before we even go close to Social Security and Medicare. But Ron Wyden comes back out here and gives the same scripted line. Anything that's a spending cut at all. First thing, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And again, as somebody who hates all three of those programs and hates government spending more than anything else, I still advocate that should be the last place that we go to spending cuts for. As much as I really think they need to be rethought, that is the last place we should be going and looking at spending cuts for right now. We've got to change the way we're spending money wastefully in this country, and we're going to make sure that happens, McCarthy previously told reporters, adding, we don't want to put any fiscal problems through our economy, and we won't. Well, I hope you enjoy those tire tracks, McCarthy, because Mitch McConnell just threw you under the bus. From Fox News again. GOP senators insist Biden will negotiate on the debt ceiling. Budget reform better to start now. You want to bet? And I think that Biden should be negotiating on the debt ceiling. I am a big advocate for that. But explain to me, Brandon Gillespie and GOP senators who are going to be named in this, before I even read this article, explain to me, what incentive does Joe Biden have to negotiate on the debt ceiling? What incentive is there? No matter what happens, the news media will blame Kevin McCarthy. Plain and simple. Biden will be portrayed as the hero who saved the republic and who got the evil Republicans to buckle and give him all the spending that he wanted, because he's going to turn around and spend that money on you, which is a lie. With the mainstream media, including Fox News, running cover for him, what incentive does he have to come to the table? Even if he is the one making his own decisions. Please explain to me what incentive he has for this, because I don't see it. But let's read on. Republican senators had a message for President Biden while addressing the national debt and quickly approaching debt ceiling deadline during a Wednesday press conference. He will negotiate. Rand Paul. President Biden needs to know. Absolutely. He will negotiate, and it's better to start now, Rand Paul told reporters, pushing back on Biden admin's stance that the talks surrounding the debt ceiling are not a negotiation. Paul added the greatest security threat to the nation is the debt that no conservative and no Republican in the House will vote to raise the debt ceiling without significant budget reform. And again, by the way, I do want to point out that the opening statement from from Republicans is, and we've talked about this from the first time we started talking about the debt ceiling, the opening statement from Republicans is, we will give you a debt ceiling increase if. And the opening statement from Republicans, or Democrats rather, on the other side of the aisle is, we will not give you anything. Now give us a debt ceiling increase. And again, who's going to get blamed in this exchange? The growing U.S. national debt stands at $31.4 trillion, while the federal government's annual budget is currently operating at $6.3 trillion, nearly $2 trillion more than what it spent annually prior to the coronavirus pandemic. According to Yellen, the U.S. will need to raise the debt ceiling by June to avoid irreparable harm to the U.S. economy, the livelihoods of all Americans, and global financial stability. Senator Ted Cruz, who spoke immediately before Paul, called Biden's position on the debt ceiling unreasonable and ridiculous, and vowed that the Republican conferences in both houses of Congress will use every possible lever point to stop the massive spending contributing to the rising debt and historic inflation plaguing the nation. Well, we are at a moment in time because the American people elected a Republican majority in the House where we have the opportunity to stop this madness. And I believe it is incumbent that the Republican majority and on the Republicans in this Senate to use every lever point we have to stop the out-of-control spending that is driving inflation. And that is punishing hard-working Americans across the country, Cruz said, which is rather accurate at this point. Cruz said the debt ceiling has historically been the most effective lever point to force meaningful concessions on budget and debt reform, and he called on members of the press to avoid reporting the White House talking points that Republicans wanted to default on the national debt. Yeah, but they're going to do it anyway. Nobody standing here wants to default on the debt. Let me be absolutely clear and unequivocal. The United States of America should never ever default on its debt, he said, and that, by the way, is going to be the fuel that takes their negotiations away, because once again, the mainstream media will cover. Alright, I've got an op-ed here from New York Magazine. Pole position, I don't know what that means. Why Republicans won't name their debt ceiling demands. From Ed Kilgore. That's funny. I know what their demands are. But let's read what it is that Ed Kilgore has to say here. As the U.S. lurches towards a possible debt default thanks to House Republican hostage-taking on legislation, and you can already tell this is a very objective article, needed to extend or suspend the debt limit, it's increasingly evident that, as my colleague Jonathan Chait observed, the hostage-taker is strangely reluctant to name a ransom. Indeed, the initial Democratic strategy in this complicated chess game was simply to force House Republicans to say exactly what kind of spending cuts they propose to make in exchange for allowing a debt limit increase to wobble its way back to Joe Biden's desk. It's easy to mock GOP lawmakers for the brainlessness or maybe cowardice of their efforts to make Democrats identify the spending cuts their opposite opponents want. The Washington Post's Catherine Rampell tans the elephant's hide with considerable panache. Republicans have very serious budget demands. Unfortunately, they cannot identify what any of those demands are. I believe the first thing that was brought up on the chopping block was the IRS expansion. Was it not? And also, by the way, the last omnibus package and Ukraine funding. They say they want to reduce the deficits, but meanwhile they've ruled out virtually every path for doing so. Cuts to defense, cuts to entitlements, wiping out non-defense discretionary spending, or raising taxes. Republicans say they want lower deficits. In fact, they have pledged to balance the budget. That is, no deficit at all within 7 or 10 years, but they've not laid out any plausible mathematical plan for arriving at that destination. They promise to cut wasteful spending, but can't agree on what counts as waste. In so quickly reaching this predictable dead end in answering the world's easiest math problem, Republicans have one plausible line of defense. It's how much of the public feels about fiscal matters as well. They really don't like deficits, and especially debt. But they really don't like the kind of spending cuts Republicans are talking about either. Tax increases, of course, are categorically off the table for the GOP and have been since the H.W. Bush read my lips no new taxes debacle, which still resulted in new taxes, by the way, because H.W. Bush was a fraud. A September 2022 poll from the Deficit Scolds of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation found that Americans are up in arms about all the borrowing. A 31-month high of 83% of voters are urging the President and Congress to spend more time addressing the national debt, with the biggest jump among those under age 35, 8 points to 85%. More than 8 in 10 voters also said their concerns about the national debt has increased. Nearly 3 in 4 voters feel the national debt should be a top 3 priority for the President and Congress, including 65% of Democrats, 74% of Independents, and 86% of Republicans. From 40,000 feet, all that reading looks pretty alarming. More recently, this week, the Heritage Foundation's Daily Signal found a majority of Americans stamping their feet about it. Most Americans oppose raising the federal debt ceiling without accompanying cuts to federal spending, a new RMG research poll finds. 61% of 1,000 registered voters in the survey said Congress should either raise the debt ceiling without spending cuts or refuse to raise the ceiling at all. Only a quarter said Congress should raise the ceiling without accompanying spending cuts. The remaining 15% say they were not sure. To House Republicans, the great symbol of runaway spending is the monstrous $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill passed by Congress in December. Many of them claimed during the fight over Kevin McCarthy's speakership bid that the American people were outraged by the measure, despite the fact that it cleared the Senate, House, and White House. Perhaps they were thinking of a Twitter poll conducted by Elon Musk that showed that 75% of respondents opposed the omnibus bill. I think that a few of those senators are not going to be going back to Washington the next time they're up. And I think a few of those House Republicans are also not going to be going back to Washington after their time is up. The sad truth is, however, that the more specific you are in identifying items in one of those monstrous bills, the more support they command from the public. In 2021, Gallup published a summary of public opinion research on what was then a $3.5 trillion Build Back Better Democrat budget. soon whittled down to $2.2 trillion, and then to a net negative figure in the ultimately enacted Inflation Reduction Act, and found that its provisions were very popular despite the debt they required. Several recent polls asking about the bill in a broad umbrella fashion and all find majority support. A Quinnipiac poll conducted July 27th, August 2nd, as do you support or oppose a $3.5 trillion spending bill on social programs such as childcare, education, family tax breaks, and expanding Medicare for seniors, and found 62% support, 32% opposition. A Monmouth University poll conducted July 21st to 26th asked about both the initial infrastructure bill and the new $3.5 trillion bill, describing in the latter this way. A plan to expand access to healthcare and childcare and provide leave and college tuition support. The results were similar to the Quinnipiac poll, with 63% in favor and 35% opposed. Again, the problem with this is they always go out and paint this with the rosiest picture on small minorities of the bill. Oh, well, you want more Medicare for seniors? With several billions to trillions of dollars of foreign aid attached to it, hidden in the pork. But leave it to New York Magazine to make the op-ed and make you feel bad about wanting to live within a budget. From Fox News, Rep. Massey sports homemade national debt clock badge amid debt ceiling fight. From Adam Shaw, Thomas Massey was spotted sporting a homemade national debt clock badge in the halls of Congress on Tuesday evening amid an ongoing partisan battle over raising the debt ceiling. That's the person who should have been the speaker, by the way. That guy right there. Thomas R. Massey. Massey was seen by reporters wearing the makeshift badge as Washington faces a renewed fight over lifting the debt ceiling, including proposals to allow the government to borrow without any limit set by Congress. Politico reported that Massey built the badge himself out of a combination of roofing copper and a microprocessor. Over the course of about 3 days, he told the outlet he pulled the data from about 400 lines of code on the Treasury Department's website. The government hit the debt ceiling. Last week, House Republicans called for commitments to cut back on the expansion of federal spending, which has grown under both Republican and Democratic administration. And we don't talk about that here, because I am disappointed in that, Grant. That does disappoint me. However, Democrats have accused Republicans of weaponizing the debt ceiling as part of the budget negotiations, risking U.S. economic health in the process by bringing it close to a default, instead of risking U.S. economic health by blowing out the debt and just running it wide open. That is, by the way, kind of cool. I kind of want one of those. So, that is where we are at for that. Look, we've got, again, my position on this, of course, is no more debt, no more spending, cut all spending down. Just stop the spending, bring it down to salaries, and let all the rest of the spending come out of the states. I know that's not a realistic idea, but there is something between that and just let us spend however much we want and let us raise the debt ceiling to however far we want. There's somewhere in the middle, but there's only one side that doesn't want to talk about what's in the middle. And again, I point out that the Republican position on this, as much as I can't stand them, the Republican position on this is, we're willing to let you have a debt ceiling raise, but we need to have this and this and this. Let's talk about this. All right, let's talk about the Biden document scandal from Axios. National Archives misses deadline to give House info on Biden's classified docs. from Serene Habashian. What do you want to bet nothing's going to happen off of this? The National Archives did not meet the Tuesday deadline to turn over requested materials to the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability for its investigation into classified documents found at President Biden's home and former office. I'm shocked. The National Archives is very partisan right now. Or so it seems. I guess I can't say that with full certainty. I can show what it seems like with the way that they're asking. The National Archives has not produced the requested documents to the committee at this time, a spokesperson told Axios. Chairman Comer's request still stands and anticipates moving forward with the transcribed interview with NARA's general counsel soon. The National Archives, of course, did not immediately return to Axios' request for comment, but has said it needs to consult with the Department of Justice before sharing information. So, yeah, I had no fantasy that they were going to hit this deadline. And I don't even know what it is that Comer is looking for in this. Mostly because it all involves classified documents, most of which we will never see. Representative Comer reacts to the National Archives blowing off Biden documents request. Very disappointing. And I promise this is the last Fox News article that I have up for the day. I promise this is the end. Which is good, because I can't stand them. But, again, a lot of the times you'll get something like this one with Rep. Comer that CBS, ABC, or even local outlets won't touch. From Anders Hagstrom. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky on Wednesday condemned the National Archives for blowing off his request for information relating to President Biden's mishandling of classified documents. The National Archives records admin blew past the January 24th deadline for providing the documents. On Tuesday, a move Comer called very disappointing. Comer had requested the details about NARA's communications with both the Justice Department and Biden's lawyers regarding the classified documents. Any reaction to the fact the National Archives has not yet responded to the oversight request? Fox News' Tyler Olson asked on Capitol Hill. Very disappointing, Comer responded. Comer went on to give his thoughts regarding Tuesday's news that the former Vice President Mike Pence also found classified documents in his own home in Carmel, Indiana. Pence immediately turned over the documents to the DOJ and then notified Congress about the incident. Pence is cooperating, Comer said. We're going to treat Pence the exact same way we treat Biden. There's a big difference as far as Pence offered to cooperate and is showing sign he's going to be fully cooperative with our investigation. And again, it depends on the outlet that you read from, especially with the Pence one, because, what was it, CBS was the first one we read from, and CBS made it seem like Pence had just found information on handwritten notes and maybe some other documents that a lawyer came out and said, this could be classified, we need to do something about this, rather than actually having a document with a big classified marker on the front of it. And again, most importantly, I can't answer to what's in the documents because I don't know, and neither will any of the rest of us ever. Which is why it's what makes prosecuting this so hard. With Snowden, even though he didn't get prosecuted, or like Chelsea Manning, reality winner, people like that, they actually leaked and released the documents, so they were fair game in a trial. But that's what we have for that. And I think this is an op-ed. No, this is a regular article. It reads like an op-ed, but from NBC News, America's system for handling classified documents is broken, say lawmakers and former officials. From Dan DeLuce, Peter Nicholas, Scott Wong, and Garrett Hockey. The U.S. government system for labeling and tracking classified documents appears to be broken. with potentially serious consequences for the country's national security, lawmakers, former officials, and scholars said on Tuesday. News that classified documents were found in the private home of former Vice President Mike Pence. God, let's never ever let him be a president. Marked the latest in a series of revelations involving both Trump and the Obama administrations, raising questions about how the government labels material as secret and how it manages those documents, including after a president leaves office. Democratic and Republican lawmakers say there was a systemic failure if both Obama and Trump admins could not keep track of classified documents after their tenures ended. What the hell is going on around here is my reaction, said Marco Rubio, Little Marco of Florida, the ranking Republican on the Intelligence Committee. Look, obviously there's a systemic problem in the executive branch, talking about two successive admins from two different parties, with officials at the top level having their possessions, documents in places where they don't belong. Rick Scott said, "No one's above the law. I don't know how anybody ends up with classified documents. Everyone ought to explain how they end up with classified documents." The aides and officials charged with ensuring secret documents are always in a chain of custody appear to be falling down on the job, said a scholar of intelligence issues, Locke Johnson, a professor emeritus of public and international affairs at the University of Georgia. It's their job to make sure these busy policymakers understand the importance of classification and return the documents to their proper place, said Johnson, who was a congressional aide on intelligence committees and advised previous admins about intelligence matters. There's an incredible amount of sloppiness in the handling of these documents that's really quite disconcerting, Johnson said. We need some stiff penalties for the people in the chain of custody who don't take their job seriously enough. White House staff members are supposed to log every classified document, assign it a number, and keep track of it so the document can be accounted for at all times. Former officials say the process did unravel somewhat during the Trump admin because of the president's habits, and some inexperienced staff members, but supporters of the former president, have denied that portrayal. In Congress, lawmakers and staff members with clearance have to follow strict rules and look through material in secure rooms. When I read a document, I have to sign for it, and then I have to return it before I leave there, said Bob Menendez of New Jersey, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. What has to be looked at is the whole nature of what is classified and what is not, and under what circumstances. But until that happens, he said, it should be such that they're preserved in places that create no risk to national interest or security. Elizabeth Gautier, a national security law expert at Brennan Center for Justice, a think tank at New York University School of Law, said the root of the problem is the sheer volume of material that is stamped as secret, overwhelming the White House and federal agencies trying to make decisions and govern. And that is, I think, probably one of the best takes on this so far. You have 50 million classification decisions each year, 90% of which are probably unnecessary. That's a lot of rules that have to be complied with every hour of every day, and some of that is going to slip, said Gautier, a leading expert on overclassification. And that is it, right there. There is way too much classification, there is way too much secret in this government. And a government that is supposed to be by the people, for the people, as our founders intended, there is way too much secrecy. And we should be able to see some of the inner workings of this government. That should be a given. That shouldn't even be up for debate right now. Throw the doors wide open. Let us see what's happening there. Instead, no. The big thing is, the only thing that should be classified, and this is just me spitballing into a microphone at this point, the only thing that should really be classified is military operations that are currently ongoing and active, where people might get killed if somebody outside of our government knows what's happening with them. And there are people that'll say that healthcare information should also be classified, but I point to the fact that the government shouldn't be involved in healthcare anyway, so that's kind of a moot point. As long as they are, I will actually hear that argument and take it into a compartment and say, okay, you've got a case there, but The government has no business being in healthcare. But there is just way too much classification going on here. Our government is way too opaque. I like that I read that far. I wasn't planning on reading that far down into that article. I'm glad I did. Because, yeah, this Elizabeth Goitian is absolutely right. 100%. Alright, let's cover a couple more things and we'll head out here. We might get out here early tonight, you guys. Unless you overwhelm me with live chat again, but it looks like just... I saw Ron Helton before I switched over the live chat. He threw up the sticker, and I just see Grant and Tattoo Lover. So if you guys want to weigh in here, I'm doing a little bit more of it now. This isn't going to be completely, as I said at the top of the show, this isn't going to be like the morning show where it was just absolutely no live chat. Because I'm not in a hurry to get to work as soon as I'm off air, like I used to be. From ABC, drug companies and doctors sue over abortion pill access and test cases of federal power. From Ann Flaherty. In lawsuits that could impact abortion access nationwide, the drug manufacturer GenBioPro and a doctor in North Carolina on Wednesday filed separate federal complaints seeking to strike down state restrictions on the abortion drug mifepristone. GenBioPro, which manufactures the pill, filed its complaint in West Virginia, naming defendants as a county prosecutor, and the state attorney general, Patrick Morrissey, who said in a statement that his state's laws was clearly constitutional. Both GenBioPro and the suit filed in North Carolina by Dr. Amy Bryant argued that the state's restrictions on the abortion pill are at odds with the rules set by the FDA, the federal agency tasked by law to determine drug access and safety. North Carolina cannot stand in the shoes of the FDA to impose restrictions on medication access the FDA determined are not appropriate and that upset the careful balance the FDA was directed by Congress to strike. According to the complaint filed by on Bryant's behalf by the law firm King & Spalding in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of North Carolina. GenBioPro suit argues much the same. Federal law preempts West Virginia's ban and restrictions. These laws are impermissibly restrict patients' access to mifepristone and GenBioPro's opportunity and ability to market, promote, and sell the medication in the state. Since the court overruled Roe v. Wade in June, at least 14 states have ceased nearly all abortions, including access to medication abortion, either because of laws passed by state legislators or because of confusion over the laws. Limited access has resulted in soaring demand for the mifepristone, a single pill that terminates early pregnancy by blocking the hormone progesterone. So, is this like Plan B? Is that what we're doing here? I don't know enough about this, and I'll come right out and say that. Under FDA rules, mifepristone can only be prescribed by certain providers who understand how the drug works and agree to look out for potential complications or medical conditions such as ectopic, which requires immediate medical attention, but the FDA also says mifepristone is safe enough to be provided via telehealth and mailed to a patient without evaluating them in person. I don't like any of that. I'm not a big fan of telehealth, though, either. Earlier this month, the FDA expanded the rules to allow for retail pharmacies to dispense the drug for the first time, so long as they follow certain rules. Some pharmacy chains like Walgreens and CVS say they plan to join the program, but are continuing to sort through the details. But many states, including North Carolina and West Virginia, have their own rules when it comes to dispensing the drug. In North Carolina, for example, mifepristone is allowed early in pregnancy, in line with the FDA rules, but the state also requires the patient obtain the drug through a physician in a specially certified surgical facility. The state also requires state-mandated counseling 72 hours in advance of any abortion. In a statement to ABC News, Bryant said that she filed her lawsuit because there's no medical reason for politicians to interfere or restrict access to the drug. These burdensome restrictions on medication abortion force physicians to deal with unnecessary restrictions on patient care and on the healthcare system, she said. Bryant's lawyer, Eva Temkin, argued federal rules for the drug preempt state regulations when the two conflict. And see, I don't know about that, because I do think that the 10th Amendment comes into place. But I'm pretty sure this is going to be one that really, really gets elevated. So I think we are going to see what happens with this one, definitely. I'm pretty sure this is going to be the top story, probably coming up this summer, especially if it gets to the Supreme Court, in which we'll all be told how evil the Trump appointees are and how it's an illegitimate court. And again, with the way that it's described here, and I don't know, because this is obviously something I'm never going to take, I don't know if this is a plan B. The way it's described in here, it's a plan B. It prevents the implanting of the fertilized egg. And I know that there are people who have different religious viewpoints on that. But we will continue to watch this and see where this one goes. Got one from The Blaze. CBS anchor abruptly fact-checks Gavin Newsom after he disparages gun owners, claims the Second Amendment is a suicide pact. From Chris Enlow. CBS News anchor Norah O'Donnell promptly fact-checked California Governor Gavin Newsom on Monday when he appeared to disparage gun owners. There's video of this, by the way. Guns and the Second Amendment once again become the national talking point after a massacre in Monterey Park over the weekend. The perpetrator, who targeted a Chinese-owned dance studio, used an MAC-10 assault pistol. Authorities have said the firearm was modified, the LA Times reported, but they have not clarified exactly how it was altered. I don't think that matters. If I remember correctly, I think a MAC-10 is illegal in California no matter what. I may need to fact check that, but I think a MAC-10 is automatically. Despite California having the strictest gun control laws in the U.S., according to O'Donnell, Newsom said he's not surprised the mass killing happened. Then he disparaged the Second Amendment and gun owners. Nothing about this is surprising. Everything is infuriating, Newsom told O'Donnell. The Second Amendment is becoming a suicide pact. Well, let's listen.
We return to our top story now out of Monterey Park, California. At least 11 people died in a mass shooting during what should have been a joyous holiday weekend. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell spoke with California Governor Gavin Newsom about what he says needs to be done about gun violence.
It's a disgrace.
We found the governor here in Monterey Park, not far from the dance studio where at least 11 were killed.
Nothing about this is surprising. Everything about this is infuriating.
California has the strictest gun laws in the U.S.
I mean, the Second Amendment is becoming a suicide pact.
But there's many people in this country that support the Second Amendment
I support,
and our lawful gun owners.
Yeah, I have great respect. I have no ideological opposition to someone reasonably and responsibly owning firearms and getting background checks and being trained.
Authorities say the shooter used a modified pistol with a high-capacity magazine. But how did he get a gun that's illegal in the state of
Exactly,
California?
we'll figure it out. That's going to happen. There's never, you got to enforce laws. Things fall through the cracks, but it doesn't mean you give up.
The governor also emphasized the role of mental health in incidents like these.
I'm really proud of the work we've done in this space, but we've had decades of neglect in this space. But respectfully, I will submit that regardless of the challenges as it relates to behavioral health, there's not a country in the world that doesn't experience behavioral health issues.
While police are on alert in New York, San Francisco, and L.A., Newsom assured anyone celebrating they can do so without fear. Should people be worried about future celebrations?
No, I've been dozens and dozens New Year's celebrations, some of the most safe and vibrant events, festivities that I've had the privilege to participate in.
And Nora O'Donnell joins me now for more. Nora, before I get to the governor, I just want to ask you, you're there. Give us a sense of the scene there in front of the ballroom.
We're going to move off of this here because we're done with what Newsom had to say. But O'Donnell quickly pushed back and defended Americans. But there's so many people in this country that support the Second Amendment and are lawful gun owners, she told Newsom matter-of-factly. Yeah, I have great respect. I have no ideological opposition to someone who is reasonably and responsibly owning a firearm and getting background checks and being trained, Newsom claimed in the response. But that's not true. That is a lie, and you know that's a lie. Despite claiming he has no ideological opposition to gun ownership, Newsom appears to downplay the role of mental health in mass tragedies. I'm really proud of the work that we've done in this space, but we had decades of neglect, he said on Monday. But respectfully, I will submit that regardless of the challenges it relates to behavioral health, there's not a country in the world that doesn't experience behavioral health issues, he added. And yes, those people run out and stab and punch and throw rocks and drive cars into people because the evil is not in the armament. It is in the wielder. From Newsweek. Because, you know, every time you give another inch, they demand another mile. Fighter jets for Ukraine. Kiev pushes the West to break final taboo. From David Brennan. This week has been dominated by debates and news regarding Western armor deliveries to Ukraine. American, German, and British heavy tanks will soon be on their way to Ukrainian battlefields, making a major diplomatic victory for Kiev almost 1 year in the making. 11 months of unprecedented Western support has broken many military taboos. 1 year ago, proposals to supply shoulder-launched portable air tank, anti-tank rather than anti-aircraft weapons were controversial. I would say that's still controversial. Now Ukraine's armed forces are operating some of NATO's most advanced systems to devastating effect. Kiev requested the Western-made fighter jets as soon as Russia's full-scale invasion began in late February 2022. To date, Ukraine has received Soviet-made fighters and spare parts from some NATO nations, but provision of modern Western platforms has been deemed impractical to a dangerous step that may be interpreted as escalatory by the Kremlin. What do you think sending those tanks over was? With Ukraine making plans for its new tanks, including who they're going to sell them to. Oops, did I say that out loud? Fighter jets and long-range missiles, specifically the MGM-140, Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, appear to be the only remaining military taboos. Last week, Dutch Foreign Minister Wopke Hoekstra said the Netherlands would consider any Ukrainian request for American-made F-16 fighter jets with an open mind, adding that there are no taboos on military aid soon after President Volodymyr Zelensky made another public appeal for fighter aircraft. So again, my question here is, where do you think this money is going to come from? U.S. Ambassador to the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe, Michael Carpenter, told Baltic News website Delphi he believed D.C. would support any European nation wishing to send its American-made jets to Ukraine. Negotiations between Kiev and D.C. have been progressing behind the scenes for months, according to a Politico report from September. Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson Colonel Yuri Inhat said last week that the U.S. has already decided what kinds of military aircraft will be sent. Justin Bronk, a senior research fellow for air power and tech at the Royal United Service Institute think tank in London, told Newsweek there's a genuine change in the political risk appetite among Western leaders on the fighter jets issue. There's a relatively finite window in the next 6 months or so for Ukraine to make potentially decisive territorial gains before the next major wave of Russian mobilization and industrial re-engagement. Bronk said. The West's realization that supporting Ukraine is a long-term project that will likely outlast the current war is helping to advance proposals for military aircraft. There's no scenario in which they need utterly tails off, even if Ukraine were to win on the ground this year, Bronk said. It's less of a question on whether we supply heavy weapons like tanks and potentially fighter aircraft, and more about when we do it, and that there's therefore a strong argument to say that you should do it now. Why F-16s? Russia's inability to establish air superiority over Ukraine is one of the most glaring failures of the war. I hate to say this, but I think it's because they're not trying. Almost a year into the full-scale invasion, Russian aircraft largely avoid flying over Ukrainian-controlled territory and limit close air support missions at the front lines. Western aircraft could, in theory, bolster Ukrainian sorties while helping defend Ukrainian cities from Moscow's ongoing missile campaign. They are crucial now, Alexander Daniluik, former chair of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, told Newsweek. Western fighters, he said, offer significant value in their own offensive operations as well as to defend ourselves against missile. For me, actually, it is a bit disappointing that on planes we are moving quite slowly. So, and my question is, now if you're going to start to get supersonic planes, when does this turn into an offensive and Ukraine to go back now and try to go back after some of the Russian motherland? I mean, from what I keep hearing, you're winning. Why do we keep having to up the ante? You're winning. You kick those damn Ruskies out from what you guys have told me. But, hey, you know, who wins when the defense contractors have congresspeople in their pocket? From Axios. Justice Department sues Google for corrupting ad market. From Ashley Gold and Sarah Fisher. The DOJ in 8 states on Tuesday filed an antitrust suit against Google's parent company Alphabet, accusing the tech giant of illegally abusing its dominance in digital advertising and violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's the second major antitrust suit filed against Google by the Justice Department in the last 3 years, and if successful, it could force Google to sell off much of its ad business. The DOJ and a coalition of state attorneys general sued Google in 2020 for allegedly using anti-competitive tactics to illegally monopolize the online search and search advertising markets. That lawsuit is ongoing. Competition in the ad tech space is broken for reasons that were neither accidental or inevitable, the filing reads. One industry behemoth, Google, has corrupted legitimate competition in the ad tech industry by engaging in a systematic campaign to seize control of the wide swath of high-tech tools used by publishers, advertisers, and brokers to facilitate digital advertising. Bloomberg reported Monday that the lawsuit was imminent, and a reminder that it is Ron Helton's favorite publication from his favorite politician. The suit is seeking a judgment that Google has unlawfully monopolized both the publisher, ad server market, and advertiser ad network in the US and acted unlawfully by tying products together. Today's lawsuit from the DOJ attempts to pick winners and losers in the highly competitive advertising tech sector. It largely duplicates the unfounded lawsuit by the Texas AG, much of which was recently dismissed by a federal court. DOJ is doubling down on a flawed argument that would slow innovation, raise advertising fees, and make it harder for thousands of small businesses and publishers to grow, a Google spokesperson said in a statement. Look, I mean, here's the thing with Google is, I mean, it's got money. So if any company comes back up and tries to rise up and do something that Google wants, essentially, they just go back and buy it out. I mean, there's even been a joke about that. I remember in the late seasons of 2.5 Men, back when I still watched network television, when the Charlie 2 Walden, who was a tech developer, an internet developer, and an internet developer billionaire, was designing an app, the Electric Suitcase, I believe it was called, seemingly with the express intent of having Google come back and buy them out. And I believe it was in the billions of dollars that they bought them back out for. That was the dream in the late aughts and the early teens. To come back out and have Google buy out your company and make you a billionaire. You develop it, Google comes back out and integrates it. I mean, that's what happened with Waze. That got integrated into Google Maps. It's not exactly a secret that they buy out anything that they want and anybody who could come back and knock them back off their high pedestal. This is well known for, well, since there's been a Google almost. Let's see, from Gizmodo. Google is screwed even if it wins the antitrust case. From Thomas Germain. In '82, the DOJ wrapped up a 13-year antitrust case against the IBM. The DOJ lost, but so did IBM. The tech landscape changed, and IBM was distracted and had to move slowly under the increased scrutiny. Microsoft and Apple swooped in and knocked IBM off its perch 20 years later. The same thing happened to Microsoft. The DOJ launched an antitrust investigation, and ultimately Microsoft wasn't broken up. But Apple, Google, and social media companies like Facebook left Microsoft in the dust. Now it seems like it's Google's turn. The DOJ and 8 state AGs launched a massive antitrust lawsuit against Google on Tuesday, accusing the search giant of operating a monopoly in the online ad business and asking a court to break the company up. Win or lose, Google is in trouble. AI tools like ChatGPT pose an existential threat to the company's search business. Google.com is the most popular website on Earth, but Google needs to use everything at its disposal to fend off competition right now, which is exactly what it needs to avoid doing, with the DOJ breathing down its neck. There are so many typos in this article, I probably shouldn't have read it, but if you'll pardon the jargon, this kind of thing is what experts refer to as the big problem. When you're under the sort of scrutiny and defending yourself from the Justice Department in 8 very impactful states, it's going to be much harder for you to operate and make acquisitions, said Jason Kint, CEO of Digital Context Next, a trade association that represents roughly 80 publishers, including the New York Times, a former newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, and Gizmodo parent company Geo Media. The lawsuit couldn't come at a worse time for Google. Google did not respond to a request for comment. So, and yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that does come back out, and again, even if they win, like the article says, there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on them, and I do think that there's going to be something coming out of Tesla, or out of Elon Musk's sphere, that's going to rise up to try to do something. I mean, the thought was go back to try and buy out BlackBerry and make that a viable thing again, with a different operating system, which I'm not 100% in favor of that, but I mean, there's something new out there. The next Google is there. We'll see what happens with that. All right, just a couple more here, then we will do something that restores my faith in humanity, something I'm thankful for, and head out of here for the day. From the Daily Wire, Paul Pelosi attack footage to be released after court order. From Tim Pierce. A San Francisco judge has ordered that police body cam footage related to an October attack on Paul Pelosi be released. The order comes after a coalition of news outlets filed for a motion to release the footage on January 11th. The coalition included such outlets as the New York Times, a former newspaper, the Washington Post, where democracy goes to die in darkness, and Fox News. The public and press have standing to assert their rights of access to the court records and proceedings, the coalition argued in its court filing. The body cam footage was reportedly played in court in December and showed an assailant striking Paul Pelosi with a hammer. Pelosi, husband to former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, was attacked on October 28th by a nudist activist who broke into the Pelosi residence seeking to kidnap the then House Speaker. Prosecutors said in a pretrial hearing the activist, who prosecutors identified as 42-year-old David DePape attacked Paul Pelosi after not being able to locate his wife. DePape has pleaded not guilty on all charges, which include both state and federal charges. He's expected to appear in state court on February 23rd to set a date for his trial. He's being held in jail without bail. Well, good. I want to see what happened. Now, of course, whatever comes out of here, the mainstream media will come back and curate, depending on whether it's favorable to Pelosi or the narrative, or whether it flies in the face of the narrative, and the conspiracy theorists were right. But at least we'll get closure off of this one. And the last one. Facebook and Instagram to end Trump's suspension from platforms. From Hallie Jackson and Dara Gregorian. Former President Trump's Facebook and Instagram accounts are being reinstated, the social media giant Meta announced on Wednesday, a little more than 2 years after he was suspended from the platforms over incendiary posts on the January 6th selfie fest at the Capitol. Trump's accounts will be reinstated in the coming weeks and come with the new guardrails in place to deter repeat offenses, Nick Clegg, President Global Affairs at Meta, said in a statement. Meta owns Facebook and Instagram. Those guardrails will include heightened penalties for repeat offenses, penalties which will apply to other public figures whose accounts are reinstated from suspensions related to civil unrest under our updated protocol. In the event Mr. Trump posts further violating content, the content will be removed and he will be suspended for between 1 month and 2 years, depending on the severity of the violation, Clegg said on the company's website. Trump celebrated the announcement on his social media platform, Truth Social. Facebook, which has lost billions of dollars in value since deplatforming your favorite president, me, has just announced that they're reinstating my account. Such a thing should never again happen to a sitting president or anyone else who's not deserving of retribution, he wrote. The move by Meta comes weeks after the time frame Facebook gives itself to reevaluate the 2021 decision, and shortly after Republicans, many of whom have been critical of Facebook's decision, regained control of the House. Then House Minority Leader and now House Speaker Kevin McCarthy vowed to rein in big tech power over our speech, after Facebook announced the duration of Trump's suspension in 2021. Trump's presidential campaign officially petitioned the social media giant to allow Trump back on the platform earlier this month. We believe the ban on President Trump's account on Facebook has dramatically distorted and inhibited the public discourse, Trump's campaign wrote on its January 17th letter to Meta, according to a copy of the letter reviewed by NBC News. A Trump advisor who spoke with NBC earlier this month on the condition of anonymity said the former president's campaign was prepared to turn his allies in the House to pressure Facebook, if necessary. And good. I mean, my big question here is whether or not he'll actually use it. Because, of course, I mean, he hasn't done anything on Twitter yet. And he's been back on that since, God. When did the world end the last time? What was that, middle of October? Beginning of October? Something like that? I don't know. There was a lot going on in my life at the time. There was a lot going on in my life at the time. But, you know, we're here. It's happened. We'll see if he posts, and we'll see if the world ends if he posts again. And we don't know. Alright, we're going to finish out here today with something that restores my faith in humanity, something I am thankful for. And I do think we're going to go on the restores my faith in humanity aspect of things. Now, I want to talk about an exchange, not something that I'm not going to name names, by the way, when I do this, but I want to talk about a thing that's come up, and, you know, we were talking just a bit about it in a group chat that I'm in, and that is, and again, I'm not going to show the tweet, and I'm not going to name names, but there's an account out there that, let's say the woman that ran the account was somewhat promiscuous before. Now, I appreciated her on her libertarian takes, and actually there was a point where a mutual acquaintance, not friend, but a mutual, had determined that her and I would be a good fit, but it didn't work. And then she, as happens a lot with women, she started dating somebody and decided that she wanted to be obedient and patriarchal and, my husband this and my husband that. And I understand that with new relationships. I've been in that. I've been guilty of that in my life. I understand that. I'm not going to try to down her on this. Now, she says that she is now deleting a bunch of people, and she did unfollow me, unfortunately. Which is lame, because I actually thought that we had developed a friendship in spite of her promiscuity and my refusal to participate in the promiscuity. I thought that we had come to an understanding on everything. And the way that she worded it was a bit of a slap in the face to me, because it does remind me that, many people do look back and see me as fully unrepentant, as a sinner. But, one of the things, regardless, and, in the ensuing discussion, it was pointed out the fact that a lot of the people that did follow her and that she followed, because she followed back almost everybody that followed her, did come on the fact that, there was a lot of thirst out there. There were a lot of people out there that, for lack of better words, wanted to see her tits. And I think in a lot of the instances at the time, she was happy to oblige. And as much as it pains me to see the fact that she's not going to be commenting on anything that I've done again, and, again, it was always, this is a person I considered a friend. Not just an e-thought, but an actual friend at some point. I do understand, and was brought up to me, that, it is hard to go out and sin no more while still being surrounded by the people who were there from the beginning of your sin. And I do, again, in spite of everything off of this, I am glad that she's finding this path. I don't necessarily agree with the path that she's taken for it, but I'm happy for the fact that she's doing it. And I'm happy for the fact that people can come back out and change the path and go. If you guys... I can tell you right off the bat, for most of the people who are going to watch this video, both live and after the fact, if you saw me in circa 2010, you wouldn't believe that you're talking to the same person. You're listening to a person right now who regularly womanized, who regularly had 3 or 4 different dates with 3 or 4 different girls throughout the course of a week. And it took some hard... It took some very, very hard lessons from the Lord to pull me back onto the straight and narrow, because I didn't want to listen. Because being on the straight and narrow at the time, being a serial monogamist, had left me basically in the hands of somebody who wanted to see me do harm to myself for entertainment. And you couldn't convince me otherwise that, there was just no point to trying to be better with my life. And I am glad that I was able to, pull this back around. And it was a different journey. Like, I didn't run down and get into a relationship and find religion that way. But the fact that people can be given a second chance and change and do things and make right for the world. I've said, because I'm making some new friends and becoming close with people now, and especially one person. One of the things that I've said as I've been, going back over and talking about things is, man, I used to suck. I try very hard to be a good person now, but I cannot come back out here and tell you guys a lie and say that I was always this good. I used to suck out loud. I was a bad person. I was a very bad person. So to this person, and again, not going to name names, I do say, go out and sin no more. It sucks that we had to part ways this way, but do go out and sin no more. I am very happy for the path that you've taken for that, and I hope it turns out well for you. And I do hope to continue to go down and keep myself on the straight and narrow. There are temptations out there sometimes, but still to try to be a good person. You guys know, especially those of you who have been here since before I moved. I was worried. And I said it right out on one of the last shows before I moved. I was always scared. And I was going to turn back into that person that I was in my 20s. And I was going to go back to sucking. And I don't want to suck anymore. I want to be awesome and help people. So, that is what restores my faith in humanity. Have a good night, everybody. Let's throw some outro music up. So, thanks everybody who came by, chatted in the live chat. It was a bit of a slow night tonight. It definitely was. But, you know, we had a few people in here watching and carrying on, and Grant pointing out the fact that I do have a Windows update waiting for me, so at some point I'll have to do that. That's been waiting for me for like 2 weeks, and I've been bypassing it and bypassing it and bypassing it. So, anyway, come back in here tomorrow night, as we will do things that I like and things that I hate, and I've got some good ones up for that. And more news, more headlines. We'll see what happens. Possibly the abortion case, or the abortion pill case coming up. I'm sure we'll be talking about the debt ceiling some more, because it's a day that ends in Y. And there may be even some retribution and some more hurt feelings about what's happening with Kevin McCarthy. So come back and join me for that. We will see what happens in the next 22 hours for the news. Hope to see you guys here. Hope to see some new friends and new faces in here. Definitely looking forward to that. If you are on the Twitch side, stick around. We will go find somebody to raid, and we will see you here next time on Contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.